What is the difference between a 14-inch pizza and a musician? A 14-inch pizza can feed a family of 4. For the next few minutes, I am going to try and convince you to support music. As that joke illustrates, there's quite a large difference in the way that we think about musicians. Oftentimes we think of them getting into a limo, sipping on Cristal, going off to an awesome party, beautiful women, fast cars. But sometimes we actually think about them in the cold, hard reality of what things actually are. Barely surviving, barely able to feed themselves, nonetheless feed a family of 4. I myself am a musician, that's me, and as well I'm a recording studio employee, so that's where I work, and as well I was previously a music marketer. I would help people decide they wanted to buy music. And I've also spent a little bit of time in the last few days researching this topic, and I'm going to explain to you how I think we can make a difference in the way that music is created. Music is important to all of us. That's the one thing that I got back from our surveys, is that every single one of us found that music was at least somewhat important to our lives. And furthermore, music is very important to society. Music allows us to discuss things that are sometimes hard for us to say. They allow us to discuss social issues. They allow us to do things that sometimes we just can't do in a normal capacity. So in order to keep music vibrant, we need to not simply write for free. So for the next few minutes, I'm going to discuss how music is becoming more and more accepted as something that should be free, what happens when that does happen, and what we can do to help support musicians. So should music be free? That was one of the questions I asked. Vast majority of you thought it should. So let's talk about that. Victor Luckerson, in a Time article, discussed how US digital track sales in 2013 fell by 14%. It's the first time this has ever happened in the history of digital music. So there's obviously a sea change in how we're consuming music. Furthermore, in that same year, Spotify, YouTube, all those streaming music services saw a rapid rise in the growth of their use. Now, a lot of that has to do with now people are feeling, well, I won't pirate music, I'll use a streaming service. So they're trying to find more legal alternatives, which is a good thing. But let's talk about what exactly are some other things. YouTube put an out, I think some of you remember that. Showed up on your iPhone and you were like, who the heck is YouTube? I think my parents listened to them. This is one way that some musicians are doing it. They've actually got $100 million from Apple in order to put this album out. So what happens when music is free? This is a small chart here. Matt Silverman wrote, Mark Townsend, in a Observer article from 2013, wrote about how oftentimes Spotify pays very, very little to its artists. His numbers were around about 1 cent a track, and about 1 million plays equals about $6,000. Now that's before labels take their money out, that's before it all gets divvied up. That's the money that Spotify is paying. This chart actually shows how much you have to sell or stream in order to make minimum wage. And this is if you're just the only person, if you're a solo artist, you made all the music by yourself. Spotify is about 4 million streams. So in order to help somebody make minimum wage, you'd have to play the music a lot. Now this is also everybody listening to it, I understand that, but it's not often that an artist receives that many streams, and when they do, you can see how little they're making. Furthermore, as Matt Silverman from Mashable explains, these streaming services themselves are barely able to make money as it is. Pandora in 2012 had negative 20 million in net revenue, and Spotify had negative 57 million in net revenue, which means that these sites themselves aren't even making money. Furthermore, in order to make all this music free, somebody has to pick the bill up. So we got Beyonce shopping for Pepsi, we got Lady Gaga is eating Doritos on stage, we have festivals sponsored by large corporations, And as John Jurgensen illustrates in a Wall Street Journal article, the Black Eyed Peas on their 2010 tour actually took a time out of their tour shows, every tour, in order to integrate BlackBerry into the show. So they would have a fan text a number, they would come up on stage with the BlackBerry thing, and they would take a time, and will.i.am, who's a member of the Black Eyed Peas, would actually freestyle the text that he got. So it's changing the way the artists are displaying their music. So this leaves the question, how can we support music? As music consumers, as music fans, how can we help ourselves have a musical experience that we want to have for ourselves and for our children? One example of how this can be done is through a website called Bandcamp. John Tozzi from Bloomberg Business wrote an article about Bandcamp. Bandcamp is not anything bigger than iTunes as far as in its size. In fact, they only made $7.3 million in 2011, which is more money than we make on a daily basis, but it's not more than, say, somebody like iTunes would make. iTunes is much, much larger. However, the big difference between Bandcamp and iTunes is that Bandcamp has a much higher percentage that they pay their artists. So 84% of the revenue that you pay when you buy something on Bandcamp goes straight to the artists or their record label. Furthermore, Bandcamp is also a lot more direct. The artists themselves are actually able to interact right with their fans like they would be able to on a social media website. It's a much more effective and connective way of displaying music. This chart right here, as illustrated in the Los Angeles Times article, shows how the indie artist Sufjan Stevens put out an album without iTunes on an independent record label that him and his father own, and it is able to go on to number 48 on the Billboard 200. So it has some rewards. You can connect directly with the artists, you can see them succeed, and you can enjoy their music free of some of the corporate interventions that you might have not liked. Furthermore, a lot of artists are turning to things like Kickstarter or Indiegogo. This is another alternative called Pledge Music. Like Bandcamp, it's a lot more direct with its users, and it's designed specifically for music, which, as Ari Herstad from a Digital Music News article explains, creates a 90% success rate for its artists, which is a huge difference compared to Kickstarter or Indiegogo. Furthermore, most artists receive 140% of target. Some of these bands you may know, there's all kinds of different music on there. In some of them you can see are even reaching usable large numbers on Billboard charts. So in conclusion, since more and more people are wanting music to be free, but free isn't necessarily good for music in general, we have to support music ourselves. And when we do, we're going to get a much deeper connection with musicians than we ever did before. We're going to be a part of the process. So it's either going to be us supporting them or our corporations. It's either us or Pepsi. So as Beethoven was supported by the Archduke Rudolph, and as Bach was supported by the Leipzig Council, and the Black Eyed Peas are supported by BlackBerry, now you can support your favorite musicians. Thank you.